The leather whip cracked across Rebecca Lang's shoulders for the third time, and she refused to scream even as blood soaked through the thin fabric of her torn dress, because showing weakness to Thomas Garrett and his gang of ranch hands would betray everything she had fought for in the summer of 1878. The dusty square of Cripple Creek, Colorado, held its breath as the assembled crowd watched, some with satisfaction, others with horror, while the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the woman tied to the wooden post outside the saloon. "That will teach you to fill their heads with dangerous ideas," Garrett spat, coiling the whip for another strike. He was the foreman of the largest ranch in the territory, a man who believed keeping workers ignorant kept them compliant. Reading makes them think they are better than they are. Makes them question their place. Rebecca lifted her head, her auburn hair matted with sweat and dust. Knowledge is not dangerous. Keeping people in darkness is the real crime. The whip came down again, and this time she could not hold back a sharp gasp. Her vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges. Through the haze, she saw faces in the crowd, some of her students, their eyes wide with fear and grief. Maria, who had just learned to write her own name. Young Thomas, who devoured every word she taught him. Old Samuel, whose weathered hands had trembled with joy when he first read a passage from the Bible on his own. A gunshot split the air. The crowd scattered like startled birds, women shrieking, men diving for cover. Rebecca's head snapped up to see a tall figure on horseback, smoke still curling from the barrel of his revolver pointed at the sky. The man sat astride a dusty roan, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, but she could see the hard set of his jaw, the tension in his broad shoulders. "That is enough," the stranger said, his voice carrying across the square with quiet authority. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the packed earth. Garrett's face turned purple with rage. "This is none of your concern, Drifter. This woman broke the law." "What law?" The stranger walked forward, and Rebecca could see him more clearly now. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar traced a thin white line along his left cheekbone. "Last I checked, teaching reading was not a crime in Colorado. She is teaching ranch hands and servants, making them unfit for honest work, filling their heads with notions above their station." The stranger stopped a few feet from Garrett, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. "Seems to me a man who can read and write is more valuable, not less. But then, maybe you prefer your workers too ignorant to know when they are being cheated." The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Garrett's hand twitched toward his own weapon, but something in the stranger's eyes made him reconsider. This was not a man to draw on lightly. There was a stillness about him, the kind that marked someone who had faced death before and walked away. "Cut her down," the stranger said. "The hell I will." The stranger's gun was in his hand before anyone saw him draw, the barrel pointed steady at Garrett's chest. "I was not asking." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett jerked his head at one of his men, who hurried forward with a knife to slash the ropes binding Rebecca's wrists. She collapsed forward, would have fallen if the stranger had not holstered his gun and caught her, his strong arms surprisingly gentle as they steadied her. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly. Rebecca nodded, though in truth she was not certain her legs would hold her. Up close, she could see the concern in his gray eyes, the tight line of his mouth as he took in her bloodied back. "My horse can carry two." He did not wait for agreement, just swept her up into his arms and carried her to the roan, lifting her into the saddle with a strength that made it look effortless. He swung up behind her, one arm circling her waist to hold her steady. Garrett found his voice. "You are making a mistake, friend." That woman is trouble. The stranger looked down at him, and there was no friendliness in his expression. My name is Vincent Ashford, and I am nobody's friend who whips a woman for teaching reading. He touched his heels to the horse's flanks, and they were moving, leaving behind the stunned crowd and the choking dust of the town square. Rebecca's consciousness drifted in and out as they rode. She was aware of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, the solid warmth of Vincent's chest against her back, the careful way he held her to keep from jarring her injured shoulders. Once, when she swayed, his arm tightened protectively. "Stay with me," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "We are almost there." She did not know where there was, but she trusted him. It seemed absurd to trust a stranger who had materialized out of nowhere like an avenging angel, but he had stood between her and that whip when no one else dared. That counted for something. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, climbing into the foothills where pine trees provided blessed shade, and the air smelled of resin and earth. Finally, Vincent guided the horse down a narrow trail to a small cabin tucked into a clearing beside a creek. It was well built and tidy, with a sturdy corral and a lean-to shelter for the horse. "This is my place," Vincent said, dismounting and reaching up to lift Rebecca down. "It is not much, but it is safe." He carried her inside, laying her gently on a bed covered with clean blankets. The cabin was simple but comfortable. One large room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, shelves lined with provisions, and a few personal belongings that spoke of a solitary life. Rebecca noticed books on one shelf and felt a flicker of hope. "I need to clean those wounds," Vincent said, his voice rough. "It will hurt, I know." Rebecca tried to sit up, gasped at the sharp pain that lanced through her back. "I am sorry to bring trouble to your door." "You did not bring it, I invited it." He was already moving, heating water in a kettle over the fireplace, gathering clean cloth and a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to burn." She nodded, gritting her teeth as he carefully cut away what remained of her dress's back, exposing the raw welts. His hands were steady and gentle as he cleaned each wound, though she could hear his breathing change, sense the anger radiating from him. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why risk this?" Rebecca stared at the rough log wall, focusing on the grain of the wood to distract from the pain. "Because I remember what it was like to be hungry for words. My mother taught me to read when I was 5 years old, and it opened the entire world to me. How could I not share that gift?" Vincent worked in silence for a moment, his hands careful on her torn skin. "My mother taught me to read too. She said it was the one thing nobody could take away, knowledge in your head." His voice softened. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her during a hard winter. I am sorry. She would have liked you." He finished cleaning the wounds and began applying a salve that smelled of herbs and beeswax. "She used to teach the other children in our settlement back in Missouri. Nobody whipped her for it, though. Times were different there, perhaps, or the men were better." Vincent made a sound that might have been agreement. He bandaged her shoulders with strips of clean cloth, his touch impersonal but kind. When he finished, he helped her into one of his shirts, huge on her smaller frame but blessedly soft and clean. "Rest now," he said. "You are safe here." Rebecca caught his hand before he could move away. "Why did you help me? You do not know me." Vincent looked down at their joined hands, his calloused fingers dark against her pale ones. "I know enough. I know you are brave. I know you stand up for what is right, even when it costs you. That is more than I can say for most people." He met her eyes, and she saw something in his gaze that made her heart stutter. "Rest. We will talk more when you are stronger." He pulled away gently and moved to the fireplace, busying himself with preparing food while Rebecca lay back on the bed, exhausted and aching but feeling safer than she had in months. She watched him move around the cabin with an easy competence, this stranger who had saved her life, and wondered what twist of fate had brought him to Cripple Creek Square at precisely the right moment. The next days passed in a haze of healing. Vincent proved to be a surprisingly good nurse, changing her bandages twice daily, making nourishing broths and simple meals, never pressing her to talk when she was tired. He slept on a bedroll by the fire, giving her the privacy of the bed, and was always respectful, always careful. On the third day, Rebecca felt strong enough to sit at the table while Vincent made breakfast. She watched him crack eggs into a pan, his movements efficient from long practice. "You live alone here?" she asked. "For about 2 years now. I came to Colorado after." He paused, flipping the eggs. "After I realized I was tired of fighting other men's battles. I was a ranch hand, sometimes a hired gun when money got tight, rode with some rough men, saw some rough things." He slid the eggs onto tin plates, added biscuits from the Dutch oven. "Decided I wanted a different life. Bought this land with money I saved, built this cabin. I run a few head of cattle, do odd jobs in town when I need supplies. It is quiet, but quiet suits me now." Rebecca accepted the plate he handed her. "And then you rode into town and got involved in someone else's trouble." A smile ghosted across his face, transforming his serious features. "I suppose I did, but this was different." "How?" Vincent sat across from her, his gray eyes intense. "Those men were beating you for trying to help people better themselves." "That is not a fight I can walk away from, no matter how much I want a quiet life. Garrett will not forget this. He holds grudges. Let him. He draws on me, he will regret it." There was no boast in Vincent's voice, just simple fact. Then his expression softened. "But I am more concerned about you. You cannot go back to town, not now. Maybe not ever. Garrett has made you an enemy, and he has friends." Rebecca had known this, had felt it in her bones, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Her small room at the boarding house, her students, her work, all of it was gone. She set down her fork, suddenly not hungry. "Then I have lost everything, not everything." Vincent reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You are alive. That counts for something." She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her darkest moment like an answer to a prayer she had not known to speak. "Why do you care so much? You do not even know me." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. "When I saw you tied to that post, blood running down your back, and you still held your head high, still defiant, I saw courage I have rarely known. And when you spoke about knowledge not being dangerous, about keeping people in darkness being the real crime." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I saw someone worth knowing, someone worth protecting." Heat rose in Rebecca's cheeks, and it had nothing to do with fever. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. "Thank you for everything." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Vincent cleared his throat and pulled back, picking up his fork. "Eat. You need your strength." As her body healed, Rebecca began to notice other things about Vincent. The way he hummed softly while doing chores, old songs that spoke of a childhood before hardship. The careful way he maintained his guns and tools, everything clean and in its place. How he always made enough coffee for 2 now, without asking if she wanted any. The books on his shelf, well-worn copies of Shakespeare and Dickens and Twain, that he read by firelight in the evenings. One evening, a week after he had brought her to the cabin, Rebecca was finally able to move around without too much pain. She found Vincent sitting outside on the porch he had built, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "May I join you?" she asked. Vincent looked up, and something warm kindled in his eyes. "Please." She sat beside him on the wooden bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. For a while they sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into twilight. "I have been thinking," Rebecca said finally. "About what you said, about my students." Vincent glanced at her. "What about them? They still need a teacher. They still hunger to learn. Just because Garrett tried to stop me does not mean they should lose that chance." A slow smile spread across Vincent's face. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking I could teach them here. At night perhaps, or early morning before anyone notices them missing. Small groups, so it is less obvious. They could come through the woods, avoid the main roads." Vincent considered this. "It would be dangerous for them and for you." "I know. But danger does not erase the need." Rebecca turned to face him fully. "You said I was brave. Help me be brave enough to continue what I started." Vincent looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing the risks, the complications. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, on one condition." "What condition?" "I teach too. I can help with the men, the ones who might be uncomfortable learning from a woman. We share the work, share the risk." Joy bloomed in Rebecca's chest, sudden and overwhelming. "You would do that. You started something good, Rebecca, something worth protecting." "So yes, I would do that." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Besides, it gives me an excuse to spend more time with you." Her breath caught. They were close now, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, the way his gaze dropped to her lips. "Vincent." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, mindful of her still healing injuries. His lips were warm and slightly chapped, and he tasted of coffee and possibility. Rebecca's eyes fluttered closed, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong beneath her palm. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I did not plan this," he said quietly. "I came to town that day to buy supplies. I heard the commotion, went to see what was happening, and then I saw you. I am glad you did. So am I." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But I need you to know something. I am not a good man, Rebecca. I have done things I am not proud of. Hurt people who probably did not deserve it. I have been running from my past for a long time." Rebecca touched his face, tracing the scar on his cheekbone. "We all have pasts, Vincent. What matters is who we choose to be now, and the man I see is good. He is kind and brave and willing to risk everything for strangers who need help. That is the man I know." Something in Vincent's expression cracked, a vulnerability showing through the armor he usually wore. "You make me want to be that man, the man you see when you look at me. Then be him." She kissed him again, putting all her hope and gratitude, and the strange, fierce feeling growing in her chest into it. He responded with barely leashed passion, his arms coming around her waist to pull her close, and for a moment, the world was nothing but the two of them and the promise of something new beginning. Word spread quietly among the people Rebecca had taught. A whispered conversation in the general store, a note passed at church, a child sent with a message through the woods. And slowly, carefully, they began to come to the cabin in the foothills. The first night, 3 people showed up. Maria, the young mother who had cried when she first wrote her daughter's name. Samuel, the old ranch hand with gnarled fingers and a hunger for scripture. And Thomas, a boy of 15 who worked at the livery stable and dreamed of more than mucking stalls for the rest of his life. They came after dark, moving quietly through the trees, and their faces when they saw Rebecca alive and well were worth every risk. Vincent had rearranged the cabin, moving the table to create more space, setting up benches he had built during the day. He had even made a rough easel where they could hang a slate board he had purchased on a quiet trip to a town 2 days' ride away. "Welcome," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for coming, for being brave enough to continue learning." "We heard what happened to you," Maria said, her eyes bright with tears. We feared the worst. Vincent saved me." Rebecca glanced at him where he stood by the door, keeping watch. "And now he is going to help us. We will be more careful, more secret, but we will not stop." "Not unless you want to." "Never," Thomas said fiercely. "Mr. Garrett does not own my mind. He cannot stop me from learning." Vincent spoke from his position by the door. "He can try. So we have to be smart. Come 1 or 2 at a time, different nights if possible. Tell nobody who might talk. If anyone asks where you are going, have a story ready. Checking traps, visiting a sick relative, anything believable." Samuel nodded slowly. "The boy is right to be careful, but I have lived 72 years without being able to read the good book myself. I will not die ignorant if I can help it. I will take the risk." And so they began. That first night they worked on basic letters, Vincent helping Thomas with his writing while Rebecca guided Maria through a simple passage. Samuel practiced the alphabet, his weathered voice reciting the letters with the solemnity of prayer. When they left near midnight, slipping back into the darkness, Rebecca felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. Hope. More students came in the following weeks. A young woman named Lily who worked as a seamstress. 2 brothers who did odd jobs around town. An older woman named Ruth who had been a slave before the war and had never been allowed to learn. Each one brought their own hunger for knowledge, their own brave determination. Vincent proved to be a natural teacher, patient and encouraging, able to break down complex concepts into understandable pieces. He worked especially well with the men and boys, who seemed to relax around him in a way they sometimes did not with Rebecca. She watched him guide a student's hand across the slate, his voice low and calm, and felt her heart swell with affection and admiration. They fell into a rhythm, the 2 of them. Vincent would wake early to tend his cattle and do his ranch work. Rebecca would prepare lessons, mend their clothes, cook their meals. They moved around each other in the small cabin like dancers who had rehearsed their steps, instinctively knowing where the other would be. And at night, after their students had come and gone, they would sit together by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. "Tell me about your childhood," Vincent said one night, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the flames dance. Rebecca leaned into his warmth. "It was happy, mostly. My father was a schoolteacher in Boston. My mother was the daughter of a minister. They believed in education for everyone, boys and girls alike. I grew up surrounded by books and ideas." Her voice softened. "They died in an epidemic when I was 20. Cholera swept through our neighborhood. I survived. They did not." Vincent's arm tightened around her. "I am sorry. I came west afterward, could not stay in that house full of ghosts. I thought I would find teaching work in a proper school, but—" She shrugged. "Most towns did not want a woman teacher, or they wanted someone older, more matronly. So I took what work I could find, teaching privately until I came to Cripple Creek, and started teaching people that others wanted kept ignorant. I could not help it. I saw the need, the hunger for learning in their eyes. How could I deny them?" She looked up at Vincent. "What about you? You said you came from Missouri." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "My father was a farmer. We had a small homestead, not much, but it was ours. When I was 13, raiders came through. Ex-Confederate soldiers who could not let go of the war, looking for anyone they thought had Union sympathies. They burned us out, killed my father." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Rebecca could feel the tension in his body. "I took my father's gun and my mother's Bible and left. Lied about my age and signed on with a cattle drive. Grew up fast and hard. And your mother, she had died the winter before, like I said. Fever. If she had lived, maybe I would have stayed, tried to rebuild. but there was nothing left for me there. He looked down at Rebecca. I spent 10 years drifting, hired my gun out to whoever was paying, tried not to think too much about whether what I was doing was right or wrong. And then one day I realized I was becoming the kind of man I hated, so I stopped. Saved my money, came here, bought land, tried to become someone my mother would not be ashamed of. Rebecca took his hand, threading her fingers through his. She would be proud of you now. What you are doing, helping these people learn, protecting them. Vincent brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. I am trying. You make me want to try harder. They kissed then, deep and lingering, and when they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Vincent's eyes were dark with want. Rebecca, he said, his voice rough, I need you to know. This thing between us, it is not casual for me. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. Her heart raced. I have feelings for you too. I think I have since that first day when you rode into that square like some avenging angel and stood up for me when nobody else would. I want you to stay. Not just until the danger passes, but always. I want you here with me. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent. I know it is fast. I know we should probably take more time, but life is uncertain and I have learned not to waste chances when they come. I love you, Rebecca Lang. I think I started loving you the moment I saw your courage in that town square. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. I love you too, Vincent Ashford. You make me feel safe and seen and valued. You believe in what I am doing, support me even when it puts you in danger. How could I not love you? He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Vincent lifted her gently, mindful of her healed but still tender back, and carried her to the bed. They came together with a tenderness that spoke of new love, of promise and hope, of two wounded souls finding home in each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Rebecca's head on Vincent's chest, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her shoulder. Marry me, Vincent said suddenly. Rebecca lifted her head to look at him. What? Marry me? I know it is sudden, but I mean it. I want you as my wife. I want to build a life with you, teach together, work this land together, grow old together. His eyes were serious, intense. Say yes. Joy bubbled up in Rebecca's chest, bright and effervescent. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Vincent's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He kissed her deeply, then pulled her close, and they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the future suddenly full of beautiful possibility. They married a week later in a small church 2 towns over, where nobody knew their faces or their story. The preacher was an old man with kind eyes who asked no questions, just pronounced them husband and wife and wished them well. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress that Vincent had bought for her, and he wore his best shirt and a new vest. They had no guests, no celebration, just the two of them and their vows spoken in the dusty sunlight filtering through stained glass windows. I, Vincent Ashford, take you, Rebecca Lang, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever comes. For all my days you will be my home. I, Rebecca Lang, take you, Vincent Ashford, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, cherish you, support you, and build a life of meaning with you. For all my days you will be my heart. The kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise, and when they rode back to their cabin in the foothills, Rebecca felt like she was floating. She had lost so much, but she had gained everything that truly mattered: love, purpose, partnership. Their students were delighted when they learned of the marriage. Maria brought wildflowers to decorate the cabin. Samuel carved them a beautiful wooden cross to hang above their door. Thomas and the other young men built Rebecca a proper bookshelf for the growing collection of primers and books they were accumulating for lessons. Ruth stitched them a quilt, each square a different pattern, a patchwork of love and community. The teaching continued, growing slowly but steadily. Word spread carefully through networks of trust, and more people began to come. They had to stagger the nights, limit the group sizes, but the work continued. Vincent and Rebecca taught together, complementing each other's strengths, creating a warm and welcoming environment where adults who had been denied education their whole lives could finally learn. 3 months after the wedding, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. The signs were unmistakable: the morning sickness, the tenderness, the exhaustion. She stood in the cabin one morning after Vincent had gone to check on the cattle, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, and felt a mix of joy and terror. A baby. They were going to have a baby. When Vincent came in for lunch, she could not hide her expression. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 long strides. "What is wrong? Are you sick? Hurt?" "No, I am. Vincent, I am with child." He went very still. Then a grin split his face, bright and unrestrained. "Really? We are going to have a baby?" "Yes." Rebecca found herself smiling too, his joy infectious. "I am scared, but I am happy too." Vincent swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. He set her down gently, his hands cradling her face. "This is wonderful." "You are wonderful. We are going to have a family." "We already are a family," Rebecca said, thinking of their students, the community they had built. "But yes, now we will have a child too. A little person who will grow up surrounded by books and love and parents who want them to learn and grow." "The luckiest child in Colorado," Vincent agreed. He dropped to his knees, pressing a kiss to her belly through her dress. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother and I are going to love you so much." Rebecca threaded her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man, this life they were building together. But peace, as Rebecca was learning, was always temporary in the Wild West. It happened on a cold November night, 6 months after the wedding. Rebecca was 7 months along, her belly round and prominent, and they had agreed she would no longer teach in person, just prepare lessons for Vincent to deliver. She was in the cabin, banking the fire for the night, when she heard horses outside. Too many horses. Vincent had gone to the lean-to to settle their horse for the night. She heard his voice, sharp with alarm, then other voices. Angry voices. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She grabbed the rifle Vincent kept loaded by the door and moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. Thomas Garrett sat on his horse in the clearing, flanked by 6 men, all armed, all looking for trouble. Vincent stood between them and the cabin, his hand on his gun. "You are trespassing, Garrett. Leave." "I do not think so." Garrett's voice carried clearly in the cold air. "I know what you have been doing up here. Continuing that woman's seditious work, teaching people who should not be taught, making trouble. Teaching people to read is not seditious. It is decent. You cost me workers. People getting ideas, demanding higher wages because they can read contracts now, wanting to leave because they know there are better opportunities." Garrett's face was flushed with anger. "You and that woman have been a thorn in my side for too long. Time to remove the thorn." Vincent's stance shifted, and Rebecca recognized the coiled readiness in him. "You are welcome to try, but I promise you will not like how it ends." One of Garrett's men spoke up, a burly ranch hand Rebecca recognized. "There is 7 of us and 1 of you, Drifter. You cannot beat those odds." "Maybe not." Vincent's voice was calm, almost casual. "But I guarantee I drop at least 3 of you before I go down. Want to guess which 3? Want to risk being one of them?" The men shifted uneasily. This was not some untrained homesteader they were facing. This was a man who had lived by the gun, who carried himself with the confidence of someone who had survived countless fights. Rebecca made a decision. She opened the cabin door and stepped out onto the porch, the rifle held ready across her arms. 7 against 1 is coward's odds, she called out. But 7 against 2 is slightly better, and I am a very good shot. Vincent's voice was tight with suppressed fear. Rebecca, go back inside. No. She came to stand beside him, her pregnant belly between her and the gun she held. This is my fight too. Garrett's eyes narrowed. You are pregnant. You would risk your child. I would risk anything to protect what we have built here. The right of people to learn, to better themselves, to be free of men like you who want to keep them ignorant and compliant. Rebecca's voice rang with conviction. You can shoot us, Mr. Garrett, but you cannot shoot an idea. The people we have taught will continue teaching others. You cannot stop knowledge once it has been shared. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then a new voice spoke from the darkness. She is right, you know. People emerged from the trees, their students and others, 24 or more. They carried rifles, shotguns, even pitchforks and axes. Samuel stood at the front, his weathered face set with determination. We heard Garrett was coming up here, the old man said. Figured you might need help. These two have given us a gift, taught us for free, asked nothing in return. We will not stand by and watch you hurt them. Maria was there, her husband beside her, Thomas and his brothers, Ruth and Lily, and the 24 other people who had come to the cabin seeking knowledge. A community, armed and ready to defend their own. Garrett's face went from red to white. He was outnumbered now badly. And these were not gunfighters, but desperate people protecting something precious. They would fight without skill but with passion, and that made them dangerous. This is not over, Garrett said finally, jerking his horse's head around. Yes, it is, Vincent said quietly. You come after us again, after any of our people, and it ends badly for you. We have witnesses now. We have numbers. Push this, and the territorial governor hears about a ranch foreman who whips women and terrorizes communities. How long do you think you keep your position then? Garrett glared at him, but there was defeat in his eyes. He knew he had lost. With a curse, he spurred his horse, and his men followed, disappearing into the night. Rebecca's legs gave out, the terror and adrenaline finally catching up with her. Vincent caught her, easing her down to sit on the porch step, his arms around her. I am all right, she whispered. We are all right. You scared me, Vincent said, his voice rough, coming out here like that. I could not let you face them alone. Samuel approached, the others hanging back. You two all right? Yes, thanks to all of you. Vincent looked at the assembled group, his expression full of emotion. You did not have to do this. Yes, we did, Maria said simply. You have given us so much. It was time we gave something back. The community stayed for another hour, making sure Garrett and his men were truly gone, posting watches in case they returned. But it seemed the fight had gone out of the foreman. He did not come back that night, nor any night after. As winter settled over the mountains, life at the cabin took on a peaceful rhythm. Rebecca's pregnancy progressed without complications, and Vincent hovered over her like a nervous hen, refusing to let her do any heavy work. Their students continued to come, though now they came more openly, less afraid. Garrett had been quiet since that night, his power broken. On a cold February morning in 1879, Rebecca went into labor. Vincent sent Thomas racing to town for the midwife, a kind woman named Helen who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Helen arrived within hours, and Vincent was banished to wait outside despite his protests. It was a long labor, hours of pain and effort, but finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry split the air. Vincent burst back into the cabin to find Rebecca propped up on pillows, exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle. We have a son, she said, her voice full of wonder. Vincent, we have a son. He crossed to the bed on shaking legs, staring down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers curled into fists. "He is perfect. He is loud," Helen said with a chuckle, packing up her supplies. "Good lungs on this one. I will leave you three alone. Send for me if you need anything." After she left, Vincent carefully took his son, cradling the baby against his chest with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the world. Your mother and I have been waiting to meet you." The baby quieted at his father's voice, tiny eyes trying to focus. "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked. Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, "James, after my father, if that is all right with you." "James Ashford," Rebecca tested the name. "I love it. Hello, James. Welcome home." Their son's arrival seemed to complete something in their small family. As James grew from a tiny infant to a chubby baby who smiled and cooed, Vincent proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the cabin floor at night with James when the baby fussed, singing old songs in his rough voice. He built a cradle that rocked smoothly, carved wooden toys, read to his son from the collection of books even though James was far too young to understand. The teaching continued. They had to work around James's schedule now, but their students were patient and delighted by the baby in their midst. More than once, Rebecca taught with James sleeping in a sling against her chest, or Vincent demonstrated letters while rocking the cradle with his foot. As spring returned to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and rushing streams, Rebecca stood on the porch one evening, James in her arms, watching Vincent repair a fence in the corral. The sun painted everything gold, and she thought about how far she had come from that day in the town square when she thought her life was ending. Vincent looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. He set down his tools and crossed to them, dropping a kiss on first Rebecca's head, then James's. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am. How we turned something terrible into something beautiful." She leaned against him. "I thought that day Garrett had me whipped was the worst day of my life, but it brought me to you, it brought us here, to this life we have built." Vincent's arm circled her waist. "You know what I think about?" "What?" "I think about how you never stopped fighting, how you turned suffering into purpose. You could have given up, could have left Colorado, could have decided it was not worth the risk, but you kept teaching. You kept believing it mattered." "You told me to keep teaching," Rebecca reminded him. "That first day after you brought me here, you said keep teaching them, like you knew I needed to hear it." "I did know, because I saw who you were, who you are." He kissed her again, slow and sweet. "My brave, stubborn, beautiful wife. And you are my rescuer, my partner, my love." James made a gurgling sound as if agreeing, and they both laughed. 2 years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The teaching grew into something bigger than either of them had imagined. With Garrett's influence waning after his failed intimidation attempt, more people felt safe coming forward. They started having classes 3 nights a week, then 4. Vincent built a small addition onto the cabin, a room dedicated to teaching with benches and a proper blackboard and shelves for books. Some of their earliest students were now teaching others, spreading literacy through the community like ripples on water. Samuel could read the entire Bible now and led scripture study at his church. Maria taught her children and her neighbors. Thomas had saved his money and enrolled in a teacher's college in Denver, determined to return and open a proper school. Rebecca and Vincent's family grew too. When James was 2, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, after Rebecca's mother. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination, crying lustily when she wanted something and charming everyone once she got it. And 2 years after that, another son arrived, Michael, quieter than his siblings but with a thoughtful intelligence that reminded Rebecca of her own father. Vincent expanded their ranch, buying more cattle and hiring help during busy seasons. The money was good enough that Rebecca could order books from back east, building a library that served their entire community. Their cabin, once small and simple, became a gathering place, a center of learning and community. On a warm summer evening in 1884, 6 years after that terrible day in Cripple Creek's town square, Rebecca stood in their expanded teaching room, watching a class of 15 adults practice their writing. Vincent moved between students, offering encouragement and correction in equal measure. At the back of the room, James, now 5, was teaching 4-year-old Catherine her letters, the older brother patient with his chattering sister. Baby Michael slept in his cradle, unperturbed by the activity around him. Samuel approached Rebecca, his slate in hand. "Mrs. Ashford, is this right?" She looked at what he had written, a complex passage from Psalms, and felt her eyes prickle with tears. "It is perfect, Samuel, absolutely perfect." The old man beamed. "Never thought I would live to do this. Read and write at my age. You and Mr. Vincent gave me a gift I cannot repay. You repay us every time you come here, every time you keep learning." Rebecca squeezed his weathered hand. "You inspire us as much as we inspire you." After class ended and their students had departed into the summer night, Vincent and Rebecca tucked their children into bed. James wanted a story, so Vincent obliged, reading from a book of frontier tales while Catherine and Michael drifted off to sleep. Rebecca stood in the doorway, watching her husband with their children, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. Later, they sat on their porch in the darkness, the mountains looming black against the star-strewn sky. Vincent's arm was around Rebecca, her head on his shoulder. "You ever miss Boston?" he asked. "The city, the culture, everything you left behind." Rebecca considered this. "Sometimes I miss my parents, wish they could have known you, known their grandchildren, but the city itself. No, this is home now, this ranch, these mountains, this community we have built. This is where I am meant to be. Even though it started with such violence, such pain. Especially because of that. We took something evil and turned it into something good. That matters, Vincent. That means something." He kissed the top of her head. "You mean something. You changed lives, Rebecca. You changed my life. We changed each other's lives. We found each other and built something beautiful together." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, the creek babbling over rocks, the wind through the pines, an owl calling somewhere in the distance. "Tell me something," Rebecca said eventually. "That day you rode into town, what were you thinking when you saw me tied to that post?" Vincent was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I was thinking I could not be the man who walked away. I had been that man before, seen injustice and told myself it was not my problem. And it ate at me, Rebecca. It poisoned something inside me. So when I saw you there, saw your courage and your pain, I knew I had a choice. Be the man who walks away or be the man who stands up. And for once, I chose right." Rebecca turned in his arms, cupping his scarred face in her hands. "You chose love. You chose us. And I am grateful every single day." They kissed under the stars, these two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Their children grew strong and smart, educated from birth, encouraged to question and learn and think. James proved to have his mother's love of books and his father's steady reliability. Catherine was fierce and fearless, climbing trees and chasing cattle with equal enthusiasm. Michael was the dreamer, always asking questions, always wondering why and how and what if. Thomas returned from Denver with his teaching certificate in 1887 and opened Cripple Creek's first public school, accepting all students regardless of background or ability to pay. Rebecca and Vincent provided books from their library, and many of their former students sent their children to learn from the young man they had once taught. Garrett, perhaps realizing he had lost the battle for hearts and minds, left Colorado in 1886, moving to Wyoming to manage a ranch there. Nobody in Cripple Creek mourned his departure. His replacement was a younger man named Daniel, who believed educated workers were better workers, and actively encouraged his ranch hands to attend reading classes. On a crisp autumn day in 1888, 10 years after Vincent had saved her life, Rebecca stood in their teaching room, now a proper schoolhouse Vincent and other community members had built on their property. 20 students of various ages filled the benches, from children like James and Catherine to elderly folks still determined to learn. Vincent taught a mathematics lesson at one end of the room while Rebecca guided a group through a history text at the other. After class, as they cleaned up and prepared for the next day, James asked, "Mother, Father, can I ask you something?" "Always," Rebecca said, organizing books on the shelf. "How did you two meet?" Rebecca and Vincent exchanged glances. They had told their children stories of their past, but never the full truth of that violent day. James was 12 now, old enough perhaps to understand. Vincent sat down on one of the benches, gesturing for his children to join him. Catherine was 10, Michael 8, and all three looked at their parents with curiosity. "Your mother and I met because she was very brave, and I decided to stop being a coward," Vincent began. He told them the story then, not sparing the difficult parts but framing them in ways his children could understand. The injustice of people being denied education, Rebecca's courage in teaching anyway, the whipping, his decision to intervene. "They hurt you?" Catherine asked, her eyes wide with horror, looking at Rebecca. "They did, but I survived, and your father helped me heal in more ways than one." Rebecca took Vincent's hand. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. I never would have found this life, your father, all of you, if that day had not happened." "That does not make what they did right," James said seriously. "No, it does not," Vincent agreed. "Evil is still evil even when good comes from it, but we can choose how we respond to evil. We can let it defeat us, or we can use it as fuel to create something better. Like the school," Michael said, "and teaching people." "Exactly like that." Rebecca smiled at her youngest son. "We took something meant to silence and stop us and turned it into something that spreads knowledge and hope. That is how you defeat evil, not always with violence but with persistence and love and refusing to give up." Catherine was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to be like that. Brave like you, Mother, like both of you." "You already are, sweet girl," Vincent said, pulling his daughter into a hug. "All three of you are. You are growing up knowing how to stand up for what is right, how to help others, how to use your minds and hearts. That is all we ever wanted for you." That night, after their children were asleep, Rebecca and Vincent lay in their bed, the window open to let in the cool night air. "They are good children," Vincent said. "We are raising them right. They have good parents, a good father who teaches them strength and compassion. A good mother who—" Rebecca trailed off, "who teaches them courage and perseverance and the power of knowledge," Vincent finished. He rolled toward her, his hand caressing her cheek. 10 years, Rebecca. 10 years since I rode into that town square and my life changed forever. Mine too." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for being brave that day, for standing up when you did not have to. Thank you for being worth standing up for being the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." Vincent's eyes were intense in the moonlight. "I love you, Rebecca Ashford. More now than even on the day we married. You amaze me every single day. I love you too, Vincent, my rescuer, my partner, my heart." She drew him close, and they came together with the familiar passion of long love, the kind that grows deeper and richer with time. The years rolled on. Their children grew into remarkable young adults. James enrolled in college to become a lawyer, determined to fight injustice through the law. Catherine wanted to be a doctor, fascinated by healing and helping people. Michael planned to follow in his parents' footsteps and become a teacher. The school on their property thrived, eventually being absorbed into the town's expanding public education system. But Rebecca and Vincent continued to teach private classes for adults who had missed out on education in their youth, never charging a penny, always welcoming anyone who wanted to learn. In 1895, 17 years after that fateful day, Rebecca stood before the Colorado Territorial Legislature. She had been invited to speak about literacy and education, her work having gained recognition throughout the territory. Vincent sat in the gallery, watching his wife with pride as she addressed the assembled politicians. "Gentlemen," Rebecca began, her voice clear and strong, "I stand before you today as someone who was once whipped for the crime of teaching others to read. That act of violence was meant to silence me, to stop my work. Instead, it inspired a movement. Today, literacy rates in Cripple Creek and surrounding communities have increased by over 60%. Crime has decreased. Economic prosperity has increased. And it all started because people were given the opportunity to learn." She went on to propose legislation mandating public education for all children in Colorado, regardless of race, gender, or economic status. The speech was powerful and passionate, drawing on her own experiences and the stories of hundreds of people she had taught over the years. The legislation passed 6 months later. Vincent framed the newspaper article announcing it and hung it in their schoolhouse. "You did it," he said, standing with Rebecca in front of the framed article. "You changed the law, changed the territory." "We did it," Rebecca corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. You saved my life, Vincent. You gave me the space and support to continue my work. Every person who has learned to read because of our school, that is your legacy too." Vincent pulled her close, these two people who had spent nearly 2 decades building a life and community together. Our legacy, together. In the spring of 1900, they celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary with a large gathering at their ranch. All 3 of their children were there. James newly married himself, Catherine in her final year of medical school, Michael teaching at the public school in town. Former students came from miles around, bringing food and music and stories of how literacy had changed their lives. Samuel, now 94 years old and still sharp as a tack, stood to give a toast. 22 years ago, 2 people showed me that it was never too late to learn. That age and circumstance did not have to define what I could become. They taught me to read, to write, to think in new ways, and they did it asking for nothing in return except the joy of seeing others grow." He raised his glass, his hand surprisingly steady. "To Vincent and Rebecca Ashford. May they live 100 years and continue inspiring everyone they meet." The crowd cheered, glasses clinking, and Rebecca felt Vincent's arm around her waist, solid and sure as it had been for over 2 decades. She looked around at the assembled people, this community they had built, and felt a satisfaction deeper than words. That night, after everyone had gone and their children had retired to their old rooms, Vincent and Rebecca walked out to the edge of their property, where the mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky. The creek bubbled nearby, the same sound that had been their constant companion for all these years. "You remember the first night I brought you here?" Vincent asked. "You were in so much pain, barely conscious. I was not sure you would make it. I remember thinking you were the answer to a prayer I did not know I had spoken." Rebecca leaned against him. "I was so scared, Vincent, not just of the physical pain but of what it meant. I thought my work was over. I thought I had failed. Instead, you succeeded beyond anything you could have imagined. Look what you built. Look what we built together. It was worth it. All the pain, all the fear, all the risk. It was worth it to get here, to this life with you and our children and our work. Vincent turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. The moonlight silvered his hair, which had gray threading through it now, but his eyes were the same storm gray that had captivated her 22 years ago. I would do it all again, he said. Every moment, every challenge, every risk. To end up here with you, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I. Rebecca reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar on his cheekbone, the lines that time had etched around his eyes. You are my great love, Vincent Ashford. My partner in all things. Thank you for saving me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me. They kissed under the stars, these two people who had found each other in violence and built a life of peace and purpose and profound love. Around them, their ranch stretched out in the darkness, the schoolhouse standing proud, the home they had made together warm and welcoming. And somewhere in the night, in towns and homesteads across Colorado, people who had once been denied education read to their children, wrote letters to loved ones, signed contracts with their own hands. A revolution born from one woman's courage and one man's choice to stand up for what was right. A legacy built on love and learning, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserved the chance to grow. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of wildflowers and possibility, and Vincent and Rebecca Ashford walked back to their home hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, together as they had been for 22 years and would be for all the years to come. Their children would carry on their work, and their children's children after that, spreading literacy and justice, and the radical notion that knowledge belonged to everyone. It had started with a whip and blood in a dusty town square. It had grown into schools and legislation and changed lives. And at the center of it all was love, the kind that endures through hardship and triumph alike, the kind that makes two people into partners, into a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The Wild West was changing, growing more civilized, and Rebecca and Vincent had played their part in that change, one student at a time, one lesson at a time, one act of courage at a time. And they had done it together, from that first moment when a cowboy rode into a town square and chose to shelter a woman being whipped for teaching others to read, telling her with his actions and later his words to keep teaching them, to never stop spreading knowledge and hope. It was a story worth telling, a life worth living, a love worth celebrating. And it was theirs now and always, until the end of their days and beyond.